I didn't sing in church, when I was growing up. I tended to hang out more in the pool hall than I did at church. But what we used to like to do was, of course, we're talking like 60s South Georgia. So there was a lot of segregation, and especially when it comes to churches. As a matter of fact, I heard somebody just a couple of months ago, I forget what politician it was, that said we are still our most segregated on Sunday mornings, as far as churches. But what we used to love to do was, kind of sneak over to the black church in that part of town, and we were kind of afraid to go in, but we would sit outside the windows, and listen to the music that was going on in there, and thought, man, well, I wish we could have this much fun in our church. Because the music was such a celebration and it's so exuberant. And so then later on, in my early 20s, I had a chance meeting with a gospel singer who was living in California, originally from Philadelphia, but living in California, named Gideon Daniels. And Gideon had a band called Gideon and Power, which was based in San Francisco. And he had this concept for a band that was kind of multinational, multiracial, gospel music, but with contemporary lyrics, but very strict black gospel music format. And he decided that to sort of round out the composition of his group, that he wanted a white Southern male tenor to sing in his band. So he came down south, just kind of traveling around from town to town looking for the right singer and talking to people and auditioning people, and he talked to somebody who was working at a health food store or something like that down in Tallahassee, Florida. I was living in Valdosta, Georgia at this time, which is only about 60 miles from Cairo, and about the same from Tallahassee. And I said, well, there's this one guy I know up in Valdosta that, he's young and he sings pretty high, and he might kind of fit the bill, So he gave him my number, and he called me out of the blue, and we chatted on the phone and arranged a meeting a couple of days later, and I met him, and we talked, and I sang some old traditional gospel songs like Amazing Grace and Will the Circle Be Unbroken, and 3 days later I was in California. He was a very, I don't know, not imposing figure, but he was very different than most of the people I'd met or been around at that point in time, being from California, and he dressed more in kind of the traditional African garb, this it's called an African cob scarf that he would wear around his head all the time with his beads, and wore long flowing robes and stuff, and pretty flashy. And then there I am in this. What was really kind of ironic about it was we had our first meeting in this old antebellum Southern mansion with white columns and moss-covered trees, out in the country at night with a fire going in the fireplace, and there's me with this wild-eyed African chieftain.
Wow!
And but he worked. As it turned out, he was my mentor. He taught me. Up to that point, I didn't really know how to sing. I don't think. I wanted to sing, and I think I had some raw talent. And I'd never seriously considered really pursuing singing as a career, something that I would really be able to support myself with and have a career at and make money at. And then, so Gideon taught me, how to discover my voice and how to use it. And, when I went to California with him, I lived with him for about 9 months, and we would just walk the streets of San Francisco all day long. And he would sing these old gospel songs, and I would just pretty much try to mimic what he was doing. He'd sing a couple of lines, I'd listen, and then I'd try to sing it, and then every now and then he'd go, "I think you're getting it, Thomas." Wow. He always called me Thomas. So, and that was it. That was my learning process, really. And then Gideon was friends with Elvin Bishop, so that was my introduction to Elvin Bishop, and then eventually the Elvin Bishop Band after that. It's 1971, it's South Georgia. That was a different world still then, And he lived in Haight-Ashbury, so that was still kind of going on then, that whole flower power, hippies movement and stuff like that in San Francisco. And I never really traveled much or been out of South Georgia much, but I knew something big was going on in California, aside from just music, but culturally. There was a happening, And I wanted to see what that was all about, check it out, and be a part of that. I figure if I'm going to look like that, I mean, of course I had long hair and tried to dress like we thought people in California dressed.
Right.
But I wanted to get to the source and really see what it was all about. I sort of felt like the fish out of water, but it was the hate, it was a coming together of all the tribes and everything, and everyone was tolerant, and everybody was interested in, meeting people from different walks of life, and everybody being part of this sort of shared experience that was going on that involved kids from all over the country and all over the world that were, rejecting the traditional values of their parents and trying to find, a new way of looking at things and new values and a whole new way of looking at the world. And, it worked a little bit.
For a while.
It's kind of gotten homogenized
Right.
over the years, but there's still, I think the world changed a little bit after that.